Could you forgive the people who framed you for murdering the grandmother who raised you, just to get their hands on her money? I'm Sarah. I'm a 29-year-old investigative journalist in Chicago. I've spent my career taking down the city's shadiest politicians. But nothing could have prepared me for this. My own family accusing me of poisoning my grandmother, Margaret, the woman I loved more than life itself. It all started with a sharp ding in the middle of the night. The blue light from my laptop hit the walls of my silent apartment. An email from my cousin, Emily. Subject line, Will, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Johnson Law Offices. It's just one line. One line that literally turned the blood in my veins to ice. Mom says, don't tell Sarah. She doesn't deserve a dime. My name was on the recipient list, a fatal typo. I read it 3 times. My fingers were shaking on the mouse. My breath hitched in my chest like the air had been sucked out of the room. The screen blurred, and all I could see was Margaret's smile. The woman who held my hand through my darkest days, and now, the second she was gone, they were trying to erase me from her legacy, from her life. They'd swapped the will. They'd staged a murder accusation just to lock me away forever. But what they didn't know is that accidental email was the first shot fired. And Isa accused won't stop until their masks are ripped off in the light of day. The truth couldn't wait another second. The next morning, I dove into the lion's den without warning. While I'm driving alone to get justice for her. I want to know, where are you listening to this from? Drop your city or country in the comments so I know you're with me. I pulled up to the Johnson Law Offices in downtown Chicago, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Inside the waiting room, the smell of stale coffee hit me. Sunlight cut across the polished wood floors. My Uncle Richard, Aunt Helen, Emily, and Jacob were huddled in a corner, whispering. Helen saw me first. Her eyes narrowed. Her voice was sharp as a blade. Sarah, what are you doing here? We've already handled the estate. She crossed her arms, a smug smirk tugging at her lips. Lawyer Johnson, middle-aged guy with salt and pepper hair, pushed up his glasses. He was calm. Sarah was legally invited. Her name is at the center of the will. Margaret made sure of that to avoid any disputes. The room froze. A coffee cup slipped from Emily's hand, the brown liquid staining the white, rug like dried blood. Richard slammed his hand on the table, face turning beet red while Helen's jaw dropped. Jacob stood up so fast his chair nearly flipped. Emily just stammered, "No way, that's impossible." Richard stepped up, blocking my way. "You weren't invited. This is family business." "I am family," I said, plain and simple. "You know what we mean," Emily snapped. "Family respects her wishes. We don't manipulate her." Before I could fire back, Johnson cleared his throat, reclaiming the room. I wasn't just Margaret's lawyer. I was her friend for 40 years. She was crystal clear about her intentions, and I'm going to carry them out to the letter. He started opening a file, but Helen cut him off. "Mr. Johnson, look, about Sarah. She wasn't invited because we've already discussed how to split things up. We didn't want to waste your time." A face burned as they all stared me down. "Again, we've settled it," Helen declared. "She's out for a reason." Johnson frowned, looking genuinely confused. "I'm afraid there's a major misunderstanding, Mrs. Carter. No one is allowed to split assets before the will is. Even Reed." He looked straight at me. And the fact that Sarah wasn't invited is extremely unusual, especially considering the contents. "What do you mean by that?" Richard roared. Johnson looked up, calm as ever, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "I mean that Sarah's name is the only name in this will." Dead silence. It felt like the oxygen left the room. Nobody dared to breathe. "This is a scam." Richard screamed, slamming the table again, veins popping in his neck. "I assure you, there is no mistake," Johnson replied, cold as steel. "Now, let me read the will exactly as Margaret intended." He put on his reading glasses, his voice solemn and formal. "I, Margaret Elizabeth Thompson, being of sound mind, declare this my last will and testament. After careful consideration and years of watching this family, I have decided to distribute my assets as follows. The entire estate, including the Lincoln Park brownstone, Wisconsin farm, the $5 million charitable trust, and all personal belongings is left to my granddaughter, Sarah Jane Thompson. A collective gasp hit the room. Helen covered her mouth, mascara smudging down her cheeks. Jacob stood up, his chair clattering to the floor. No way. Emily shrieked, her voice cracking, after everything we did for her. Richard yelled, taking her to doctors, the family parties, keeping up her social standing while she hung out with those charity cases. Jacob leaned in, snarling, "We'll sue." She clearly wasn't in her right mind. Johnson shook his head slowly. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Margaret anticipated this. She took extreme measures to prove her mental state. She underwent 3 independent cognitive evaluations by neurologists in her final months. He handed me a handwritten note. Her familiar handwriting. Sarah, I trust you. Be careful. It won't let you be. I held the letter, rereading her words one more time. But when I flipped to the back page, a small postscript at the bottom made my blood turned to ice. P.S. Sarah, someone in this family is hiding a secret your father uncovered. And then, just weeks later, he died of a heart attack. I won't name them, but you'll know when the time comes. Be careful, because this truth isn't just about money. It will tear apart every definition of family you've ever had. I set the letter down, my heart redlining. Someone in the family, that phrase haunted me. Who could hide a secret so dark it cost my father his life? And was that secret why they, especially Uncle Richard, always looked at me like an invader, a threat that had to be neutralized at all costs? I didn't have the answers yet, but my grandmother's letter had sparked the first flame. The journey to find the truth, the kind of truth that rips families apart, had just begun. I lost them. Early, my father to a heart attack when I was 10. My mother to cancer when I was 15. Grandma, Margaret, became my only real kin. My father had been the rebel of the family, refusing to work for Uncle Richard's real estate empire to pursue art. The family never forgave him for that. When my mother passed, Grandma Margaret didn't hesitate. Sarah is coming with me. Her voice was steel in front of the whole family. For the next 4 years, I lived with her in that old Lincoln Park brownstone. She was my sanctuary. In a kitchen that always smelled like apple pie, she taught me my first life lesson. You're like me, Sarah. You see who people really are, not what they own. She gave me her grandmother's silver necklace, a token of love that they would later try to twist into proof of my manipulation. She also mentioned Michael, my grandfather's best friend, who was holding on to one of my father's paintings and would find me when the time comes. Back then, it sounded like a fairy tale, but those were the first bricks she laid to protect me. Money doesn't define a person's worth, she taught me. How they treat others when they have nothing to gain, that is the true yardstick. Those words were etched into my soul, and they prepared me for the war ahead as Margaret hit her 80s. Her health began to slip, and the family started whispering that I was playing her to snatch the inheritance. I started visiting her twice a week, bringing books, helping with her meds, or just sitting and listening to her stories. We'd bake apple pies using the old recipe, the scent of cinnamon filling the wooden kitchen. Only I knew she liked a little extra honey in the dough. Flower in your hair again, Sarah, she'd chuckle, reaching out to brush it away, her voice still sharp even as her hands trembled. Meanwhile, the rest of my family could barely be bothered to visit. Uncle Richard came once a month, his eyes scanning every item in the house as if appraising them rather than talking to his own mother. Aunt Helen brought expensive gifts, an imported silk scarf, a bottle of perfume, but Margaret didn't need them. She stayed exactly 45 minutes, checked her watch, and left, leaving a suffocating trail of perfume in the living room. Looking at them, I saw only hollowness and felt a profound sadness rising within me. The first major crack happened 2 years ago, right after Margaret had heart surgery. Uncle Richard called a family meeting at the Lincoln Park house, claiming it was to discuss her care. I arrived late, my coat still damp from the rain, and found not just the family, but a real estate agent waiting in the living room with a glossy folder. "We're discussing the sale of the Wisconsin farm," Richard announced, his voice oozing confidence as if it were already a done deal. The Wisconsin farm was where Margaret had spent every summer since she was a child, where she taught me to pick apples and told me stories about my father. "The maintenance is too high. It's pointless to let it sit empty all year," my uncle continued, his arms crossed, his gold watch glinting under the lights. I looked at Grandma and saw her mouth tighten. Sin, she disagreed, though she remained calm. "Has she agreed to this?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp. Uncle Richard waved me off as if I were a naive child. "She understands this is the practical choice. At her age, she can't go there anymore." I pushed back immediately. "Just last week she told me she wanted to go back to the farm this summer to see the apple orchards." The room went silent. Aunt Helen cleared her throat with a forced smile. "Sarah, you must have misunderstood. Grandma knows her limits." Margaret finally spoke, her voice low but firm. "I did tell Sarah that. I have no intention of selling the farm." The real estate agent awkwardly packed up his papers and hurried out, leaving behind a thick tension. Uncle Richard turned to me, eyes burning. "You always do this, Sarah? You think you know everything? Because you're here more, but you don't understand the first thing about finances." I replied, trying to stay calm. "I just know Grandma should decide what happens to her own property." That night, after everyone had left, Uncle Richard cornered me in the hallway, his voice low and cold. "Listen here, Sarah. You think you're special to her, but don't push it. Don't forget who actually built this family estate, and it certainly wasn't your father." That comment about my father felt like a knife. But I stood tall and looked him in the eye. "This isn't about money, Uncle Richard. This is about Grandma's wishes." From that day on, Richard began his campaign against me. It started subtle, whispers to the family that I was buttering up Margaret, suggesting I wanted to hijack the will as Margaret grew weaker after her heart surgery. Aunt Helen established a strict visitation schedule, granting me only 2 hours on Sunday afternoons, claiming it was to keep Grandma from getting exhausted. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors as I entered the Lincoln Park brownstone. But every time I arrived, Helen or Emily would unexpectedly drop by at the same time, making it impossible for me to have a private moment with her. The living room grew suffocating, thick with side-eyes and whispers behind my back. I fought to stay connected. On my days off from the newsroom, I'd bring over warm tomato soup, made exactly how she taught me, with that tiny pinch of salt to bring out the flavor. Clara, her loyal housekeeper, would often text me, "Mrs. Thompson is very alert today. You should come." Clara would always leave the back door unlocked so I could slip into the kitchen, where the scent of old wood mingled with the warmth of the fireplace. The family didn't invite me to my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Clara called me in secret. "Mrs. Thompson was so sad you weren't there." She left a box of homemade cookies on my table later with a scrap of paper. "You are her only joy." That Christmas, I was excluded again. A text from Aunt Helen hit my phone, brief and cold. "Just a small gathering this year. Mom needs her rest." I found out from Clara later that small gathering meant everyone was there except me. On Christmas Eve, I packed a box of homemade apple cake, a green wool scarf, her favorite color, and a photo album of our summers in Wisconsin. I asked Clara to tuck it under the tree in the living room, hoping it would make her smile. By that Christmas, the family had almost entirely turned their backs on me. During the party, Aunt Helen accidentally forgot to call me for the family photo. The camera clicked away as everyone laughed and posed while I stood on the sidelines, white-knuckling my glass of water. Emily didn't hold back. She looked right at me and said, "Some people are just good at buttering up Grandma to get into the will." Aunt Evelyn, Margaret's sister, was there too, but she avoided my eyes. Later, when she called me, her voice was warm as she explained, "Sarah, I stayed quiet because of the pressure from Richard, but I've always believed in you. Margaret was so proud of you." Tried to explain. I emailed Richard and Helen, telling them I didn't care about the money. I just wanted Margaret to live her life the way she wanted. Helen's reply was short. "We all want what's best for Mom." The others didn't even bother to respond. The following summer, the family held a celebration for my grandparents' 50th anniversary at Uncle Richard's house. Wasn't invited, as if I had been erased from the family's memory. I only found out through Emily's social media posts, showing the whole family gathered together. In one photo, Margaret was sitting in the corner, looking exhausted, her eyes vacant. I called her that night, my voice soft. "Did you have fun at the party, Grandma?" She answered, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It was fine, but they didn't make the tomato soup the way I like it. Richard's house is always so cold." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Sarah, I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, don't believe any piece of paper they show you. Only trust what you find in my wooden box. Remember? Only that box." Her voice trembled as if she were fighting back tears. I didn't understand then, but looking back, it was her final warning. When Margaret passed away on a spring day, the family didn't even notify me. Clara called, her voice breaking over the phone. "Sarah, she's gone." I raced to the brownstone, my heart heavy. Richard and Helen were already there, haggling with the funeral director. "Sarah," Helen said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "we were just about to call you." But her eyes were as cold as stone. The funeral was a staged performance of family politics. I was seated in the fourth row, behind distant relatives who hadn't seen her in a decade. Richard gave the eulogy, praising my grandfather's business sense, as if Margaret's legacy was nothing more than a balance sheet. No one invited me to speak, even though I was the one by her side for years. Throughout the service, I thought about her words, "I will do the right thing." They echoed like an unfulfilled promise, sitting alone in my apartment. The loneliness was crushing, as if the family had successfully deleted me from their history. But I didn't care about the money. My love for her was never about an inheritance. I decided to show up for the reading of the will. Despite the family's hostility, but before I left my apartment, I got a text from an unknown number. "Sarah, don't go to the lawyers tomorrow. They're set up to humiliate you. A family member." I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. Who sent this? If they wanted to warn me, why stay anonymous? Was it just another trick to keep me away? I didn't have the answers. But come. Morning, I was going. Margaret wanted me there. I wasn't backing down no matter what I had to face. When I stepped into the lawyer's office, Richard froze. The coffee cup in his hand tilted, a few dark brown drops staining the floor like unerasable sins. He didn't look me in the eye, stared at my handbag, suspicious that I was hiding something. The silence in that room wasn't out of respect for the dead. It was the silence of people hiding a deep, jagged rift. Every doctor had certified that Margaret was completely lucid when she made these decisions. As the truth began to sink in, I remembered her words. "I've been watching all of you for years." She wasn't just making small talk. She had been testing us, watching how we behaved when we thought there was nothing left to win. Mr. Johnson pulled a sealed envelope from his briefcase. "Sarah, Margaret asked me to give this to you privately, but given the situation, you might want to share parts of it with the family." My hands were shaking as I tore it open and read. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I've passed on, and you've just found out you are my sole heir. I'm guessing the family isn't taking this well. For years, she'd been watching. Richard only visited when he wanted to talk business. Helen brought flashy gifts, but never stayed long enough to actually talk. The grandkids, except for me, only called on birthdays or holidays. But you, Sarah, ... You came because you wanted to be with me. You've listened to my stories, made the tomato soup exactly like I taught you, and treated me like a person, not a bank account waiting to be drained. She'd actually tested them over the years. She'd asked Richard for a $50,000 loan to fix the farm. He laughed and called the place a ruined shack. She faked an illness to test Helen, who refused to help because she was too busy with her charity board meetings. Jacob refused to pay her medical bills while bragging about his new Rolex. Richard even tried to trick her into signing a power of attorney to seize control. I was the only one who didn't fail the test. With all my love and absolute faith in you, Margaret. I looked up from the letter, tears streaming down my face, to find the room in total chaos. Richard was on his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Helen was screaming at Johnson about how I manipulated her mother. Emily was doing some high-drama sobbing, and Jacob just stared at the wall like a ghost. Who knows what she put in that? Tomato soup. Emily hissed just loud enough for me to hear. Helen jumped in, her voice cold as ice. She even stole Grandma's silver necklace. Like that's some kind of proof she earned the inheritance. The murder accusation hit me like a physical blow. I knew this rumor would spread, would hit the newsroom where I worked. The weight of being framed started to burn from the inside out. There's one more thing, Johnson said, his voice cutting through the noise. Margaret recorded everything. She'd kept a detailed log of visits, conversations, and behaviors. She'd installed a high-end security system a year ago to track who came and went. She saved every text and email. She even recorded conversations totally legal in Chicago as long as one person consents. He opened another file. Furthermore, Margaret knew some items were removed from this house without permission. She kept a full inventory with photos of every single asset. That's ridiculous, Helen scoffed, but her voice was shaking. Is it? Johnson raised an eyebrow. Then maybe you can explain why the desk lamp from her office is currently in your living room, or why the rare painting from the Wisconsin farm is hanging in Richard's office, or why Jacob made a copy of her safe key without asking. Their faces went pale. The will has a clause, Johnson continued. Any item taken must be returned within 30 days. If not, criminal charges will be filed, Richard exploded. Is your game? He screamed in my face. You played her. You used that necklace to get in her good graces. And who knows what you put in that soup. The next morning, my phone started blowing up before sunrise. First Helen, then Emily, then relatives I barely knew, all demanding explanations, throwing accusations, or trying to negotiate for things they thought they deserved. I stopped answering unknown numbers. But the voicemails piled up. Sarah, it's Helen. I expect you to do the right thing. Mom clearly wasn't lucid. Call me back immediately. Hey, Jacob here. We aren't close, but she promised me that. Silver cutlery set years ago. I can show you the email. Sarah, Richard. My lawyer will be in touch. What you've done is disgusting, and it won't hold up in court. By the weekend, the hit job moved to social media. Emily posted a long, cryptic status hinting that I'd manipulated Grandma with gifts, like the necklace, and suggesting my soup might have been what ended her. The rumors hit the newsroom. My coworkers started looking at me sideways. It's crazy how fast people can fake family love just to get what they want. In the end, true colors always bleed through. Relatives I hadn't talked to in years were suddenly texting me they're attacking me. Or trying to be my best friend now that I was an heiress. I changed my number and locked down every social account I had, but the stress was physically destroying me. Couldn't sleep. My head was pounding constantly. At the newspaper where I work, my boss started noticing small mistakes I'd never make. Sarah, is everything okay? She asked after I missed an edit. They're saying I poisoned her with the soup. I choked out. The rumor that I'd spiked her food to get the money had spread through the office like a virus. My colleagues were looking at me like I was a criminal. She immediately put me on a 1-week leave. Your writing needs to be top tier, she said gently. Take the time to handle the legal stuff. During that week, I finally went to Margaret's house, my house now. I used the key I'd had for years and stepped into the silence. It still smelled like her perfume. But something was off. The house felt hollow, with glaring gaps on the walls and shelves. As I moved from room to room, the scale of the looting hit me. The antique grandfather clock in the hallway gone. The crystal collection she spent decades. Curated gutted, her jewelry box was practically a ghost town. A 19th century painting from the Wisconsin farm worth $200,000 was missing from the living room wall. It wasn't just the big-ticket items. They took the things that actually mattered. My great-grandmother's hand-knit quilt, the souvenir spoons from her travels with Grandpa, even her old recipe book, the one with her pencil notes in the margins gone. Every missing piece felt like a memory being ripped out of my heart. In the living room, I noticed her old bookshelf was slightly tilted. I gave it a shove, and it revealed a small door leading to a hidden cellar. My heart was thumping against my ribs. I tried the lock. Using my dad's birthday, it clicked open. My hands shook. She'd prepared everything to protect me, even from beyond the grave. Inside was a wooden chest containing a leather-bound diary, several USB drives, a photo of Margaret with her friend Michael, and a handwritten note for Sarah, use as needed. Michael will find you with your father's legacy. But at the very bottom, an old brown envelope smelling of dust and time caught my eye. The handwriting was my father's, for Margaret, open when Sarah needs the truth. I tore it open in a silence so deep I could hear my own pulse. Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm gone. You need to protect Sarah from a truth. I never dared to speak. Richard isn't a biological Thompson. He was adopted after Mom and Dad lost their first child. I found an old letter in Dad's safe, but the family buried it. Richard knows. That's why he's so insecure. Why he's always felt he had to prove he belongs. I'm afraid that one day, his fear of being an outsider will make him dangerous. Be careful. And if Sarah reads this, let her decide what to do with the truth. Love, Daniel. P.S. Margaret, if you're reading this, my worst fear came true. Weeks before I died, Richard found out I knew. He threatened me. He said if I went public, he'd handle it. Not just me, but Sarah too. I've tried to avoid him, but my heart is failing. The doctors say it's stress. I know it's fear. Protect her, Margaret. It's more dangerous than we thought. Set the letter down, my hands trembling. Everything clicked. Richard wasn't blood. All those years of him trying to control and destroy Med all came from this deep-seated fear. But does that excuse what he did? I looked at the letter, wondering if this was the key to my freedom, or just a ticket to a bigger tragedy. The diary was a literal burn book. It logged every visit, every conversation, every item stolen. An entry from a year ago stood out. Richard came by demanding I sign a power of attorney to protect the estate. I refused, and he left fuming. He doesn't know the hallway camera caught it. He also took the clock and the 19th century painting. Another entry, Helen brought Emily over. While Helen kept me busy, Emily went upstairs. The pearl necklace is missing. The upstairs camera saw everything. They're telling everyone Sarah manipulated me for that silver necklace. They have no idea I gave it to her because she's the only one who knows what it actually means. Final note. Jacob tried to copy my safe key today. He thought I didn't see. Stacked. I changed the locks last week. The USB drives were loaded d'emails. Photos of the assets, hidden camera footage, and a final note from Grandma. Sarah, if you found this, they've gone too far. Use this to protect the truth. Michael will bring your father's painting when the time is right. I love you. With this evidence, I called Johnson. I'm fighting back, I said. They've taken too much. Margaret expected this. He replied, his voice grave. I'll get you in touch with Rachel Carter. Rachel Carter was a powerhouse lawyer in her 50s with a reputation for being a shark. She looked at the evidence and immediately fired off cease and desist letters. "This is the most meticulously documented case I've ever seen," she said. Margaret was a chess player. But the legal response only made the family's war more toxic. Richard filed a lawsuit to contest the will, claiming I manipulated a senile woman. They hired a Dr. Mercer to forge a medical report saying she had dementia. Emily agreed to be a fake witness. Jacob even sent me forged texts from Grandma's number. "Sarah, I'm disappointed in you for splitting the family." Helen started calling my newsroom, hinting I'd neglected my job to brainwash an old woman. The rumor that I'd poisoned her with tomato soup turned my workplace into a living nightmare. My coworkers' suspicious glares became an obsession. Even sitting at my desk, the words on my screen blurred, replaced by her face and their venomous accusations. A local reporter emailed me asking for a comment on the Thompson estate scandal. The pressure was so intense, I started having full-blown panic attacks. Asterisk, my doctor put me on anti-anxiety meds. "Your physical symptoms are a direct result of prolonged trauma," she explained. Just when I thought I couldn't sink any lower, I saw the headlines. Somehow the story had leaked to the press. That night, alone in my apartment with the curtains drawn, I hit rock bottom. Every accusation felt like a fresh wound. I was actually considering giving it all up, signing over the inheritance, just to make the nightmare stop. I reached for Margaret's letter, looking for one last bit of comfort. When my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, Clara texted me every single day. She'd send little reminders of how Margaret's face lit up whenever I walked in, and honestly, those texts kept me sane. "Sarah, it's Clara. I'm holding on to a few things she wanted you to have, personal items I kept tucked away. Can we meet?" The next day, Clara handed me a small box. "She told me to keep these separate from everything else in the house. She said you'd know what to do when the time came." Inside were more memory cards and a digital voice recorder. When I plugged the first card into my laptop, I found dozens of video files. There was Margaret sitting in her favorite armchair, looking straight into the camera. In the first video, recorded about a year before she passed, her eyes were piercingly clear. "I am Margaret Elizabeth Thompson. I am recording this of my own free will and with full mental capacity, as Mr. Johnson can confirm." The camera panned to Johnson sitting nearby. He nodded, stating his name and the date. "I want to explain the decisions in my will," she continued. "For years, I've been watching my family. I tested them in different ways." She laid it all out. She'd asked Richard for a $50,000 loan to save the farm. He'd laughed and called it worthless. She faked an illness to test. Helen claimed she was too busy with charity galas. Jacob refused to help with her medical bills while flaunting a new Rolex. Richard tried to manipulate her into signing away her power of attorney. But Sarah, she made me soup. She pushed my wheelchair. She paid my bills without a second thought. And she found me legal help when I needed it. She went into grueling details, times, and exactly what she'd observed. Her voice was strong, her logic bulletproof. No one could ever claim she was confused or coerced. The next day, Rachel called, her voice urgent. "Sarah, the signature on that fake medical report doesn't match Margaret's files. We can flip this case." Rachel's words were the spark. I had been seconds away from signing over my rights just to end the pain. But Clara had told Aunt Evelyn. Evelyn showed up at my door, grabbed the paper I was about to sign, and ripped it to shreds. "Margaret chose you because you deserve it," she said. "I saw you care for her, saw you love her. That love was real. Do not give up." Watching those videos, I realized Margaret hadn't just left me her fortunes, she'd left me the weapons to defend it. She knew exactly what was coming. In the final video, recorded weeks before her death, she looked frailer, but her eyes were still burning with resolve. "Sarah, if you're watching this, things have gotten ugly, just like I thought. Remember what I always told you about standing your ground? Sometimes being kind means having the courage to set a boundary." I didn't raise you to be a doormat, honey. I raised you to be like me, and I never let anyone walk over me. For the first time since the will was read, I felt that old fire come back. Margaret hadn't just trusted me with her money. She'd trusted me with the truth. I couldn't let her down. But that strength was about to face one final, darker test. The brown envelope with my father's letter. It wasn't just about his death. It was a secret that could completely destroy Richard or turn me into something even more ruthless than him. I had to choose: protect the peaceful legacy she built, or burn it all down for total justice, no matter the cost. The next morning, I called Rachel Carter. "I have something you need to see," I said. I brought her every video, every recording. Susan Reynolds, the nurse who cared for Margaret, gave Rachel a statement. She died of a brain tumor. It had nothing to do with tomato soup or anything Sarah did. I saw Sarah here at least twice a week with books and food while the rest of the family was a no-show. Clara provided a detailed log. I had visited 64 times in the final year. Richard, 7. Helen, Tay, Emily, and Jacob only showed up for the holidays. We also pulled the financial records. Richard had been borrowing massive amounts of money for years without paying her back. And Helen had been charging personal expenses to Margaret's accounts, calling them caregiving costs. With a mountain of evidence, Rachel didn't call a family meeting. She took it straight to a probate judge in Chicago. "We're ending this today," she said. They filed in one by one. Richard with a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Helen refusing to look at me. Emily and Jacob trying to act bored but failing to hide their panic. Aunt Evelyn was there too, her gaze steady. Rachel opened the floor. "Your Honor, we have undeniable proof that Margaret Thompson was lucid when she wrote this will and that it was the family, not Sarah, who attempted manipulation." She reminded them of the clause: return the stolen items in 30 days or face criminal charges. Then she pulled up a spreadsheet, a line-by-line list of everything they'd looted from the house. She hit a button, and the large screen on the wall flickered to life. "I am Margaret Elizabeth Thompson." Her voice boomed through the courtroom. It was the video of the tests. Richard's refusal, Helen's excuses, Jacob's Rolex, Richard's attempt to seize control. But Sarah, Sarah's soup was my joy, not my end. "If you sue this girl, the world will see your greed for exactly what it is." Aunt Evelyn stood up to testify. "Margaret was my sister. I was with her until the very end. She was sharp. She loved Sarah like a daughter, and she chose Sarah because Sarah always put love above money." When the video ended, Rachel added calmly, "There are 17 more videos just like this, each documenting specific events. Margaret Thompson was perhaps the most meticulous client I've ever had." Rachel presented the independent medical report. From Nurse Susan, Mrs. Thompson died of a brain tumor, a slow-moving condition. It had nothing to do with nutrition or any food prepared by Sarah. She hammered it home. The accusation that Sarah harmed her is baseless and malicious. She didn't stop there. She pointed out the mismatched seals on Dr. Mercer's report and tracked Jacob's fake texts back to a burner app. Then she played the hidden camera footage: Richard snatching the painting, Helen stuffing the pearls into her purse, Jacob fumbling with the safe. The judge, a woman with a nonsense stare, leaned down to review the documents. She asked for one more clip to be played. The screen lit up again. Margaret in her armchair, sunlight hitting her silver hair. "I am recording this to ensure my wishes are carried out. Richard, Helen, Jacob. Jacob, you turned your backs on me when I needed you most. Richard, you laughed at my farm. Helen, you were too busy for me. Jacob, you bragged about your watch while I was in the hospital. But Sarashi pushed my chair. She made the soup I love, and she paid my bills without asking for a thing. If you fight her, you're only exposing yourselves." When the video cut to black, the courtroom was dead silent. Helen looked down, her mascara running, hands clutching a crumpled tissue. Richard sat like a statue, staring at the floor, a vein throbbing in his temple. Jacob whispered something to his lawyer, but his eyes were vacant. Emily covered her mouth, trying to choke back a sob. There was no hiding the shame. The judge finally spoke. Her voice echoing with authority, based on the evidence presented including the video footage, the journals, the independent medical reports, and the testimony of Evelyn Thompson. I hereby declare the last will and testament of Margaret Elizabeth Thompson valid and enforceable. The family's lawsuit is dismissed. She didn't stop there. Furthermore, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into the allegations of evidence tampering and grand larceny against Richard Thompson, Helen Carter, and Jacob Carter. All misappropriated assets must be returned within 30 days or further. Criminal charges will follow. The gavel came down with a crack that sounded like a bone breaking. Richard bolted upright, his face a violent shade of red, but his lawyer practically tackled him back into his seat. Helen broke down, her perfect facade finally shattering into a million pieces. Jacob kept his head down, refusing to meet my eyes. Emily whispered, and I'm sorry, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. I only looked at Aunt Evelyn. She gave me a soft smile, her eyes glowing with pure pride. As we walked out of that courtroom, Rachel squeezed my hand. Margaret would be so proud of you, Sarah. You fought for the truth, just like she raised you to do. I nodded, tears finally blurring my vision. I hadn't just saved her money, I'd saved her dignity. But deep down, I knew the real work was just beginning. I needed this family to understand that her legacy wasn't about the dollar signs. It was about the soul. The trial was over, but the healing hadn't started. Margaret didn't just leave me a fortune. She left me a masterclass in integrity and resilience. Even with the scars of their betrayals still fresh, I decided to open a door. Not for them, but for her, the woman who believed that even a broken family was worth trying to fix. I sent out a short, blunt email. No accusations, no ego. Come to the brownstone this Sunday at 4 p.m. I want to share a piece of Margaret's legacy with you. I wasn't holding my breath. After the lawsuits, the lies, and the looting, I expected a no-show, but I had to do it. It was the can you imagine moment Margaret would have wanted. Sunday came, and Chicago actually gave us a break with a clear blue sky. I spent the afternoon in that old kitchen making a pot of her tomato soup, extra pinch of salt, just like she taught me. The smell filled the house, bringing back memories of flour in my hair and her sharp, loving laugh. On the table, I placed a small, hand-carved wooden chest filled with the things she wanted them to have, not to fight over, but to remember her by. Helen showed up first. Her mascara was still a bit smudged, like she hadn't quite washed off the shame of the courtroom. Emily and Jacob followed, hesitant, eyes darting everywhere but at me. Richard was late, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, looking like he was only there under protest. Aunt Evelyn came in last, taking her seat like the steady heartbeat of the room. I stood up, took a breath, and kept my voice steady. I didn't ask you here to rehash the past. Margaret left me her estate, but she also taught me that family is where you go when things get hard. I want each of you to choose something from this box, not as owners, but as her family. Take something that reminds you of her soul. I opened the chest. Inside was a small landscape she'd painted in Wisconsin. Grandpa's silver pocket watch, a lace handkerchief she saved for special occasions, and her handwritten recipe book. Emily reached out first, her fingers trembling as she touched the painting. She used to tell me about the light in the orchards, she said, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry, Sarah, for what I said about the soup. For everything. I nodded, fighting back my own tears. Keep it, Emily. Remember? Her buy it. She clutched that canvas like it was her ticket to redemption. Jacob took the pocket watch. His eyes actually softened. I was wrong, he muttered. She always talked about honesty, and I wasn't listening. I'll try to be worth this. Helen, with shaking hands, took the handkerchief. Mom always kept this in her pocket on big days, she choked out. I forgot how much she loved you, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I reached across and touched her hand. We all have a chance to start over, Helen. Richard looked at the box and shook his head. I don't need anything, he barked. He stood there, guarded, but he didn't walk out. I didn't push him. If you change your mind, it'll be here. His silence was heavy, but the fact that he stayed. That was enough for today. Aunt Evelyn didn't take a thing. She just squeezed my hand. Margaret chose right, Sarah. You didn't just protect her money. You kept her heart beating. I ladled out the soup. This is how I remember her, I said. This soup wasn't a weapon. It was love. Let's just eat. Together. When no one argued. The sound of spoons hitting ceramic was the only noise for a while, but the air in the room finally started to feel like home again. The jagged pieces were starting to fit back together. After the meal, I told them that plan. I'm starting the Margaret Thompson Memorial Scholarship. It's for young journalists who want to tell the stories that actually matter. And the Wisconsin Farm. It's becoming a community arts center. A place where people can learn to paint, write, and find their own truth. That's the legacy she wanted, one that's shared, not hoarded. Emily suddenly spoke up. I want to help. Sarah, I can assist with organizing events for the scholarship fund, if you'll let me. I smiled and nodded. I'd like that, Emily. We can work together, Jacob added. I know a few people in construction. If the farm needs repairs, I've got you covered. Aunt Helen wiped her eyes, whispering, I'm not much of an organizer, but I can talk to donors if you need, Uncle. Richard didn't say a word, but he gave a slight nod as if he were actually considering it.
As they left, the sunset bathed the old house in a pensive silence. Reconciliation isn't about erasing the past, it's about looking at it through a different lens. A few days later, Rachel Carter called. Sarah, your father's letter about Richard, it's the ultimate weapon. You have every right to go public. I sat alone, holding that weathered piece of paper. I thought of Richard's slight nod at the table. The man who lived his whole life insecure, always desperate to prove he belonged. If I went public, all of Chicago would be whispering. He'd lose his dignity, and Emily and Jacob would likely turn their backs on him forever. I didn't want to be the one to destroy a family, even if they had tried to destroy me. Still, I stayed up all night, wondering, is keeping the secret true forgiveness, or just me protecting myself from the guilt of ruining him? I've read stories about adults finding out they were adopted late in life. They often spiral into deep depression, losing their sense of self. I didn't want that blood on my hands. Margaret chose to forgive by giving me the truth, not by hiding it. I made my choice. I won't go public. But I sent a copy to Richard with a note. Margaret knew, and she still gave you a place in her will, even if it was just a keepsake. Now I know too. The next choice is yours. I didn't know where it would lead, but I set my boundary, just as she taught me. Looking out the window, I saw Richard's lone shadow under a street lamp. He didn't know that from this moment on, every time he looked in the mirror, he wouldn't see a powerful heir. He'd see a child taken in by the compassion of the person he betrayed. That truth would be his own glass cage. As for me, I was finally free. I walked out of that door without staining my hands with blind revenge. Weeks later, Clara texted. Richard had changed. He stopped showing up at social events. He couldn't look anyone in the eye anymore. I didn't need to go public. The truth was already doing the work for me. A month later, the Margaret Thompson Memorial Scholarship officially launched. The Wisconsin Farm began its rebirth as an arts center. One afternoon, Michael O'Connor showed up with a battered suitcase. Margaret asked me to keep this for you, he said warmly. She said when you were ready, I'd know. Inside was my father's final masterpiece, the Wisconsin apple orchards at sunset, the place where he and Margaret used to walk. In the corner of the painting, he'd painted a tiny silver necklace hanging from an apple branch, the very one she gave me. Michael told me, your father painted this right before he died, as if he knew his time was up. He wanted you to remember that even when a family breaks, the love stays in the brushstrokes. I held that painting and cried. It wasn't just art, it was a reminder. My father fought for the truth, and now it was my turn. I hung it in the center of the farm, where the sunlight hits it perfectly, making it feel like he and Margaret are standing right there, smiling. The family never went back to normal, but a new kind of respect took root. Emily helped out at the fund. One afternoon, while we were sorting through Grandma's old books, her phone lit up. I caught a glimpse of the number. It was the same one that had sent me the anonymous warning before the will reading. Emily flustered and hid the phone, her eyes welling up. I didn't ask, and she didn't say. But in that moment, I realized, even when her mother forced her into those dark schemes, Emily was still the little sister trying to protect me in the only way she knew how. Jacob sent over construction materials. Richard stayed silent, but he returned every single thing he had taken. Late one night in the old house, I realized Margaret's true legacy wasn't the real estate or the money. It was the courage to love without being blind, the strength to stand for the truth, and the wisdom to know that sometimes holding the truth is more powerful than weaponizing it. I had protected the one thing she cherished most, the integrity of the heart, and in that solitude, I found peace. Margaret used to say, "A person isn't measured by what they destroy, but by what they choose to build." I chose to build a legacy of love, not a monument to revenge. And that's a choice I'll never regret. 6 months later, on a drizzly afternoon at the farm, I received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a small card with shaky handwriting. "Thank you for not saying anything. I'm sorry." No signature, but I knew. I didn't reply. But I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it into a drawer, right next to Margaret's silver necklace. Because maybe that's what forgiveness looks like. Not loud, not grand, but just enough to let us both keep living. Sarah's journey might be over, but this story about courage, truth, and choosing grace over revenge continues in the lives of so many people. Maybe even in yours. If this story hit home for you, don't just scroll past, hit that subscribe button right now. It's more than just supporting the channel. It's a choice to believe in the power of truth, kindness, and the guts to stand up for yourself. This channel is a sanctuary for stories like Sarah's, so no one ever has to feel alone in their own silent battles. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What part of Sarah's story gut-punched you the most? Was it the crushing loneliness, her raw courage, or that final lesson on the power of silence? Drop a word or a short phrase in the comments. Let me know you're out there, and let's keep moving forward together.